Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. The ONS, the Office for National Statistics, has looked at Scotland's housing sector and its private rental sector in particular. It's grabbed the data, it's analysed, and now it's formally announced that Scotland has a massive problem. And they say they know what, or rather who, the problem is. The problem comes in a little 5'3" high pile of anger and misery by the name of Patrick Harvie. Patrick, of course, rents his property and so has tried terribly hard to bring in rent controls and basically no way of evicting tenants. He knows that once he's thrown out of Parliament, he was unlikely to get another job, he can't pay his rent, and he doesn't want to get evicted and live in a box under a bridge in Arbroath. Far too good for him. But these rent controls have led to the highest rates of rent increase anywhere in Britain, including London, because landlords know they've got to get the rises in now to cover the next few years. There's also the fact that they are realigning rents to what they should be, having been artificially kept low for about 4 years. And so the rents now, had there been no control, are about the same, but there would have been stepped increases, not giant leaps. And that would have looked a lot better. Seems Harvie is destroying the future of rental properties in Scotland, which will make it far worse for tenants. But in his case, it's I'm all right, Jack. I've got my place. Let's take a look, see what the ONS are saying, and seeing why the Scottish housing market has been destroyed by the imp. Here goes. So, disastrous Patrick Harvie rent controls meant Scotland's rental prices rose faster than the rest of the UK, even London. And we all said it would. The moment they announced that there's going to be rent controls and no-fault evictions and all this sort of thing, or a ban on no-fault evictions, should I say, we knew that it would end badly. It always does. Rent controls always fail because they don't work, because they don't reflect the reality. The reality is prices go up, rents must increase, insurances go up, that's got to be covered, mortgages go up, that's got to be covered, repairs go up, that's got to be covered, all sorts of things. And if you don't allow landlords to put the rents up, then the return on investment falls, and if it falls to a point where the return on investment is sufficiently low, then the landlord just goes, tell you what, evict the tenant, sell the house, invest the money elsewhere. And that's what happens. And then there's fewer rental properties on the market. And then tenants can't go anywhere because the people buying generally can't get a mortgage. They can't buy a house. And that's why they rent. And that's the problem you have. You're going to have these people who have no option but to rent and no rental properties because Patrick Harvie is a moron. The Scottish Greens and SNP rent controls were blamed for Glasgow and Edinburgh experiencing more than 20% rises in rental prices, with Scotland experiencing a housing emergency. And of course it is. This man was in charge of housing. Of course you're going to have a housing emergency when you can't throw tenants out even if they don't pay their rent, when you're capping rent rises, and for a while there was zero rent rises. And those who bothered to pay weren't getting the rents put up. And that's if they bothered to pay. There was no reason for them to do so. They couldn't be evicted. And so a lot of landlords now have had enough. The record numbers of sales are getting out. And of course, on top of that, you have his weird, mad plan to make all private rented houses, or flats or anything, all private rented properties, have heat pumps by 2028. What that means is, in the middle of 2027, not millions, but tens of thousands of rental properties, maybe 100,000 rental properties, will be dumped onto the market all at once because the landlords don't have £30,000, £35,000 per house to put in a heat pump. That dumping of houses will form a crash. House prices crash. You think that's a good idea? It isn't, because it means that people living in houses with mortgages may find themselves in negative equity, can't move, can't sell. Property developers won't be able to build because they won't get the return because the house prices aren't sufficiently high enough to cover the cost of the materials and the labour and whatever. And so they will stop building. Once they stop building, the tradies are laid off. They'll all go south to England to work. And at the same time, of course, they might not come back. And at the same time, the need for housing increases and nobody can afford to build them. So the housing emergency will get worse. Don't let idiots dictate policy. Unfortunately, that's what's happened. And I knew, and I have said on this channel many times what will happen. And now the Office of National Statistics is saying what is happening. I was here first, folks. 35 years in the construction industry. House building, I know. Patrick Harvie's rent controls were labelled disastrous after they were blamed for rents in Scotland skyrocketing and rising faster than anywhere else in the UK. This includes the most expensive place to live in Britain, with London even having lower increases than the north of the border. It meant John Swinney has a tough decision to make during the start of his premiership, as the Scottish Greens left new rental plans, which includes tenants being able to challenge rises in rents, and with this going to a newly created rental adjudicator. First Minister promised to listen to businesses, with some housing companies claiming these controls deter them from investing in Scotland. Bada bing! Because why would you go and invest and risk capital investment to build, say, an estate? It doesn't have to be a big estate. Let's put up 40 houses, say. Bit of land, we'll throw 40 houses up there. The cash flow is that you start building and you trail it up. And so by the time you're getting towards the last ones, the first ones are already lived in. You need the sales to keep them going. If nobody can buy those first ones, your cash flow's screwed. That's number one. Number two, even if you have built them and you're selling them, the cost of the land that you'd have bought before the crash, the cost of the materials, the cost of the labour, that's all got to be factored in. And then you have your profit on top of that. You need to sell that house for, let's say, 300,000. But if there's a market crash and that house is only worth now 160,000, you can't even afford to sell it. You have to sit on it and not pay your bills. It could put some businesses under. It could tie up capital for years so that they don't have the capital available to go and build somewhere else. And so the whole of the housing market crashes. You've also got the fact that all new builds now have to have heat pumps in, which are way more expensive initially to put in. So new houses will be more expensive than older houses. So people will be less inclined to buy the new houses. The law of supply and demand. Also, the law of that's not what I want. When you're going along, going, we need a house. Let's go and have a look. Oh, what's it? Oh, it's just a nice house. What's it? Oh, look, heat pump. Nah. We'll go along and have a look over. Oh, look, there's a nice one. What's that? Oh, gas central heating. That's the one we'll have. It's 5 years older, but it's got gas central heating. That'll be the house that sells, not the one with the heat pump. And so, again, Patrick Harvie's bright idea. The problem with Patrick Harvie is he's a moron. Anyway, this rent control. When it was introduced, Mr. Harvie promised that tenants would be protected from huge cost rises. Well, we need to put him in jail then for breaking his promise. But this has ended up with any new properties on the market being very expensive, as landlords can't change the price in contract, and that has led to a substantial increase in rents. One way round it, and this is the way that somebody's actually worked this out, is that you don't give open-ended tenancies. You go a 3-year tenancy and that's it, or a fixed term, and then they must leave the property. So there's no long-term stuff. So we'll give you 3 years, but you must, and you sign it, and it is a contract in law, and it's up there that you have to leave on that date. There's no extensions at all. You have to leave, and then you put them out at that point. Now he's saying, oh well, they're trying to bring it in that there's no rent rises between tenancies, and this is where you get around it. You have a fixed term tenancy. They have to leave after 3 years. You then live in that house yourself for a period of 1 month, and then go back to your other house, or you put a relative in for 1 month, and then you come out, and then you put in the rent up, and you go, oh no, but it's not the same tenant. Look, somebody lived in there that wasn't rent. It was a family member. They've left now, and so we're remarketing it. And at that point, it isn't between tenancies. It's lived in as a non-rented property for a month. And then you go in, but you put the rent up 10%, whatever. They're already working out that this is the ways round it. Now, the fact is, if the rent controls hadn't been in place for the last 5 years since COVID and that, the rents now would actually be lower than what they're rising to. It would have been a gentle growth because landlords generally don't whack them up massive amounts. But they have to now because of the rent controls. C'est la vie. This is what happens. Moron speaks. Statistics from the ONS reveal that between September 2022 and March 24, when the rent cap was in place, private rental prices increased in Scotland by 16.5%, higher than any other UK national region, including London. And during that 18-month window, the average rent increased from £813 to £947 a month. And no one is surprised. But the rises were greater in two largest cities, Lothian skyrocketing to 21% rise, and Glasgow a 22.5% rise. And nobody, again, is surprised. Patrick Harvie is an idiot. He doesn't understand economics. He doesn't understand the construction industry. He doesn't understand the rental industry. He doesn't understand bugger all. But he sees fit to sit and condescendingly tell people, do this, do that, because I'm an expert on everything. And he's an expert on nothing. The market, if left alone, will find its level. Patrick can't abide that. A man who hasn't got his own house, unlikely now to ever get his own house, incidentally. What's he to do? Well, let's vote him out. That's a simple thing. Vote him out. Stop him getting that MP salary. Watch him go back to stacking shelves and looking at his CV and thinking, how can I polish this? I haven't got a degree. I've got all this experience and I'm used to the high life and I'm used to the big money. But nobody will pay me because they've seen me in action. I'm going to have to get a job more in suit with my qualifications. Office junior, something like that. But then would you want him in your office? Probably not. Coming up. The imp of destruction strikes again. Everything he touches falls apart. He just literally hasn't got a clue. He's far too stupid. Failed at everything he's done. Couldn't even finish a degree. And yet there he is, trying to tell people that this is good and that is good and something else is good. It isn't. Rent controls always fail, and when you make housing unattractive, nobody buys. And so the construction industry dies. When the construction industry dies in Scotland, it will take everything with it. And Scotland will go third world. And it will lose a lot of skilled people as they move south. And as I say, they're unlikely to ever return. Well done, Scotland. You voted this fella in. The SNP, any SNP voter who watches as Scotland falls apart and the economy crashes now, know that it was you putting the X in the box that's caused this. Well done to the SNP voters. You're absolute stars. Thanks very much for listening. Take care, speak soon, and I will join you later. Bye.